Okay, guys, this is Zach Weber's Sci-Fi Comic Nexus, and today I am talking to the amazing Doug Knight, Cross-Eye Comics. Doug's got quite a story. Doug is legally blind, and yet he is an amazing comic artist. Doug, tell us your background history, how you got to this point.
So when I was, I guess, 5 years old, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and it sits on my optic chiasm. So it's the intersection where both optic nerves cross over, and your left eye goes to the right side of your brain, right side goes to the left side, right eye goes to the left side. So the tumor sits right in that little nexus, and is wrapped around. And what it did was it caused tremors, which atrophied my optic nerve. So I get the full image into my eyeball, but the holes that were broken off on my optic nerve take away the image as it gets to my brain. So my eyes take everything in. There's just spots that disappear. So as far as things driving, flying jet pilot or jet airplanes, and sniper practice, stuff like that, I'm not so good. But when it comes to working on paper and finer detailed things that require upfront focus, I've developed a pretty strong knack for getting the job done as accurately as possible.
Great. And you were drawing as a kid, despite all of this. You were drawing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the my art, I guess, passion for art started when I was in the hospital. It's very, very tough to kill time, when you're sick and you're young. And we only had Super Nintendos in the teen rooms, so there was a little bit of a lack of entertainment value. You could fight over a VHS, but it was like Three Ninjas and The Little Mermaid, and at some point you got to let the other kids get their choice. So the choice for entertainment was pretty limited as well.
Mermaid. Yeah, you wanted to be the mermaid.
Yeah. But the craft room was always amply stocked. And so I remember I saw this one dude named Jason, and he could draw the hell out of biker mice from Mars. And at the time, that was my jam. And I remember just thinking, there's got to be a way that I can do that. And something about, just creating a visualization from my brain to the paper was this catharsis that took me into a completely different universe. And maybe it's the fact that it's just me, and then 2 inches away from me is the paper, and there's nothing else around me. But it was a very peaceful place, and I ended up spending a lot of time, in that void, just drawing and making monsters. And when I wasn't doing that, I was watching cartoons and looking at comic books. My vision prevents me from reading small print, so text-based comic books were always very much on the realm of unattainability. So it's kind of it's like that loves being separated by prison glass in a prison cell, right? They're right there, but you still can't touch them. So I had to rely really heavily on the visual aspect of the storytelling, and I think that's what really drew my focus to visual storytelling as an emphasis over text-based stuff. But yeah, so it was just it was a whole thing where it all started, and killing time was the perfect opportunity to create growth. And when I went to school, I couldn't see the chalkboard no matter where they sat me in class, so I spent a lot of time sketching and drawing as well. Some teachers encouraged it, other teachers probably hated me pretty passionately for it. But I did my thing, and I think it's so far been very beneficial to the overall trajectory of my future.
Great. Just excuse me a second. My cat is competing with you for my attention.
Oh, you should have sent it to camp like I did with my family.
Little monster. Okay. Here she is. This is Princess.
Was she at the coronation?
She acts like a princess, so it's very appropriate. Okay. So and then you became a tattooist, tattoo artist.
I did. So by the time I got to the end of high school, I was very art focused, but I was also like not a great academic learner. So the idea, I did the tours of all the major art schools around Southern Ontario, and like obviously they were cool. You know, obviously I wanted to live that lifestyle and be the bohemian art student. Struggling and eating ramen noodles and whatever. But it the idea of committing myself to 4 years of you know um, structured education was just it totally cored a pit in me, and it took me to a really dark place. At the same time, I started getting tattooed, and I realized that like there's this whole other aspect of low art is what it's classified as, um, where people from all different backgrounds, whether it's like highly educated or fresh off their favorite illicit substance, like they're all creating these unbelievable timestamps, and I realized that like there was not only an opportunity to grow as an artist with that, but there's also an opportunity to capitalize and make cash doing it. And it required a different type of education, but as a hands-on learner, I was much better at that one-on-one experience with a group of like nurturing peers that just wanted to see me succeed. So it was the perfect industry, I think, for me to um, grow artistically, but as well as a work ethic. Like, in tattooing, it's about productivity and production. And I remember one of my first assignments was draw 50 hands doing 50 things and have them back to me by tomorrow. And like I thrive on that kind of stuff. So I think that like, the informal education that I got from those fine folks was what really helped push me into the stratosphere that I'm at now.
Right. Tell us about the TV shows and the comics that influenced you as you when you were a kid.
So I don't know, did you guys have Captain Planet?
We didn't have it on TV in Britain, no.
Okay.
I know about it.
Yeah, so I think like obviously because of the internet that has access, but Captain Planet was like that show that you could reliably catch like at the really early times in the morning on like your public access channels or like the major broadcasters and stuff. So that was one of my first big influence shows because it was like that all-inclusive cast and like
Yeah.
it was all about the environment. So you could kind of chalk it up to a learning experience if you had to. But other than that, it was the biker mice from Mars. It was your superhuman samurai cyber squad. It was the Power Rangers, obviously. It was big bad Beetleborgs. Basically, any like group of children wearing like power armor,
Yeah.
fighting ugly monsters. They had me hooked. Um, the Mighty Ducks cartoon, it's cool that everybody has access to that now. But I remember being like, they've got hockey, they've got attitude, animals with attitude, they've got crazy dragons. Like they basically made the show for me. So that was clutch for my childhood as well. But and then like the late night stuff as far as your Simpsons that was on. I remember like my sisters and I would have to sneak away to my parents' bedroom, their little tiny TV, to like hopefully not get yelled at for watching The Simpsons when it was on. But it developed, I think, just like a cutting sense of humor for the way that we approach everything these days.
Right. Tell us about Chiasm. Is that your first comic?
Chiasm, yeah.
Chiasm.
Yeah, so the elevator pitch is it's the sci-fi retelling of my life as a childhood cancer survivor. Swap out chemotherapy with alien molecules. Um, it's kind of it's a cool story. So this is one of the variants that I did for my first Kickstarter there.
Fantastic.
It was it's a really fun book during the unspeakable years. While my son was doing online learning, I took it as an opportunity to um, try to crush an issue a month on my own. So that allowed me to generate 9 books. Maybe half of which I don't ever want to see the light of day, but I still was able to flush out 9 stories of character development, and you know, develop this world that I want to expand on. So now I am, you know, I stepped back from 0. I took one of the smaller sections from the books and I made that the issue 0. And then I just released part 1 and part 2 on the current Kickstarter. Um, and yeah, it's you know, a very edgy retelling of my childhood. And then as it develops, it's gonna kick into the adult years, and there's gonna be like a big section where he falls out of touch with the alien molecules that he's in communication with, and they're gonna have to like wake him up during a crisis, and like so there's a lot of development that I've been able to put into it. It's just a matter of, you know, getting the dollars to fund the wagon on the track.
Yeah, it's a very personal story for you. It's semi-autobiographical, as I would say. Was that a therapeutic process for you to create that?
Yeah, it totally was. It's so funny because I'm not like, I didn't cry when my kids were born. I don't like I you know, I'm not a very like expressive individual in that regards. But there were some aspects of like creating these books that like I'm about to show you a fold that like honestly it took me a few times to go back to the paper because as I was doing it, I didn't know what was happening, but it just kept triggering like the memories. So that's the little dude in crisis in
Yeah,
his MRI.
yeah,
And like just like the fact that I was hitting those emotions through my art, it wrecked me. It was like I was cutting onions. And you know, I took a couple breaks and I got back to it, and it's the first one of the first times where like my creations have impacted me in such a way. And when I was done, I felt lighter for having gotten it out and shared it with people from a different perspective. My mom took a look at it and she's like, I don't know if I could read this. You know, she had a hard time with it.
yeah, yeah,
And it's good because, you know, you when you suffer that stuff or you go through those life
yeah.
experiences, everybody goes with you. So yeah, I would say the catharsis is there. It's also just like I'm creating it because I want to have a voice that um you know, that gets picked up by other people who have gone through similar feelings, you know, the same people who deal with body horror kind of concepts, even though they might be like an invisible have like an invisible disability, you know. um and um and that's the crux of the whole universe, is that I want to be able to include all sorts of characters that have all been touched by this alien molecule, and you know, accentuated in different ways.
Yeah. I mean, you've got that focus there, that little period of your life where you were very young and you were very scared and vulnerable. And I think a lot of people can relate to that because most people have experienced something parallel to that in some way at some
Yes.
point in their lives.
Yeah.
And even if you haven't experienced that yourself, if you're a parent, your child is sick, that kind of thing. And even though you're describing something which is quite harrowing, it's still a healthy thing for people to acknowledge those feelings and to be able to talk about it and to be able to express it.
Absolutely. Yeah, the one of the aspects that like you know, with my one of my the like my current project, Super Wicked White Cell Squadron, the because it's all ages, my focus is to get it into as many children's hospitals as possible. And with that comes the realization that like at some point I'm going to be asked to visit and interact with children at children's hospitals. And then it's, you know, it's a very delicate line that I want to walk, where it's, I want them to know that, like, you know, I have had an experience similar, or as far as like, you know, I've been in those same walls kind of deal. But I don't ever want it to feel like a suffrage, you know, peeing competition. Like, I think the people that compare how hard they have it are the ones that lose sight of the fact that everybody experiences hard times differently. You know, people, I've my whole life I've heard, you know, oh, that must have been terrible. I don't think I could ever do that. I don't know if I could ever make it. Like, you've done so many things. I don't think I could do it. You know, and I've never personally said to myself, you know, you see somebody in a wheelchair, bumping themselves upstairs, or anybody with a learning disability excelling to great. I don't ever think, oh man, I couldn't do that. I think that we all have the same potential to accelerate and exceed expectations based off of what the normal standards are. You just don't know until you're in that situation. And you know, to that account, I think that somebody who has never experienced cancer, loss, breakup, like they say that they've just started from like the blueprint, and it's been like right angles and straight edges their whole life, right? No blemishes, nothing. They get their first paper cut and bleed. Well, they're gonna freak out because that's the worst thing that they've ever experienced, you know. But you can't tell them that that's not the worst thing that could happen to them, because they're not going to comprehend that. And so, you know, when it comes to that, like, everybody has experienced something in their life. I think it's just so cool to be maturing and to realize that, like, you know, the spectrum of suck is just such a vast one, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And it really, it helps. Like, it's with everything. When you have a conversation with somebody that's so stuck in their ways about something, and you can just see, like, you can set yourself aside to, like, okay, that's the helmet that they're wearing. It's okay. Like, I don't have to wear the same helmet, you know, but it's, if that's what they need, then that's good. And so it's a really powerful tool to just develop the understanding that, you know, my lens is my lens. And I just want to share it with people so that they can, you know, experience through their lens.
You are also a bit like a role model. You're a survivor, and just being there and doing what you're doing, you're representing the hope and the light at the end of the tunnel, I think.
Mm-hmm. I think so. I think that um, one of the, like, I'm very conscious about writing in acknowledgments to my books, because, like, I didn't beat the cancer. You know, sure, my peppy attitude and my optimism and, you know, youthful vigor might have helped everything that they were doing for me. But, like, you know, I say it all the time. Like, 100 years ago, I'd have been toes up. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
so I was fortunate to be born at a time in the '90s where they were making incredible strides forward. And I had this amazing medical staff behind me that encouraged my parents to normalize me, and, you know, give me the life that I deserve, and, like, just all these things. So it's like, so the only thing I did was, like, pull through. So the beacon that I represent is, like, you know, it's not so much for other people who are sick, but for their families to see that love and support, and you know, listening to the doctor's orders and stuff like that. Like, there are successors, like, there are success stories out there. And so I think that, like, just flying the flag of living life happily is what I want to show and be known for. um, the One of the things with my brain tumors, it sits on my pituitary gland as well. And it's something that, like, I touch on in later books, where it's like, you know, I want the molecules to, like, trigger something in Desmond where, like, you know, that maybe they, like, hyperstimulate his estrogen, and he just gets real, you know, complainy about everything, and, like, everything just sets him off. And then, like, they have to realize that, like, somebody was, like, one of the molecules was sitting too hard on it, you know. Or then, like, when there's going to be this whole, like, you know, Rocky moment where they have to, like, chisel him into the superhero that has to wear the armor. And, like, the whole scene of, like, him going to the gym owned by his cousin, and the molecules, like, strapping him to the treadmill, and him just, like, complaining about it, but then they, like, explode out of his ears and, like, strap him to the like front of it, and then, like, start pressing the up button, and when he starts, like, complaining, they, like, hypercharge his androgen levels, and he just starts steamrolling, you know. So it's just like, there's all the fun that you can have with it, but it's a demonstration of, in my life, like, the doctors didn't catch me not hitting puberty until I was 16. And it's because, obviously, they were so focused on the kill switch that was trying to destroy my eyesight, that they weren't paying attention to the fact that I was still 4 foot and, you know, chubbier than the Michelin Man. And so what they did was they put me on an aggressive battery of growth hormones and testosterone supplements, and, like, you know, like, I basically, I juiced through my like later years. And so it's this whole thing of like, with that came the reality of, Doug, you might not, more than likely not, are going to be able to procreate. And so I carried that with me, for much of my young adult life, and whatever. And like, after consulting with doctors, they finally told me that like it's a slim chance, but you might be able to. And then I got a baby, and then I got another baby, and so now I have like this family. And so it's like, to feed into this, the thing of like success is, it's like, was it misery that stimulated my body to, creating something, or was it the fact that I just positively hoped and was able to, get the right guidance medically and all that stuff, that I was able to create my family. I go for my appointments now, and I get a lot of fellows, so people that are training under the oncologist that I see, and they always ask the same questions. How have you been feeling? How are your energy levels? When this happens, does this happen? How are you with this? And they say, and any children? I say, yep, 2 boys. And it's always the same look. Like you can tell that even they are surprised. And so I think it's all part and parcel to just having a really good story of my life that I can present to people in different, comic book adventures.
You're almost a superhero. Like you've had the super soldier serum.
Yeah, that's right. You can call me Doug Devil.
You come back stronger than ever. Superhuman. So tell us about the super wicked white cell squad.
Hey, you got points for being the first person to run through it on the first go without stumbling.
Almost.
So, you practiced though, didn't you?
Maybe a little.
So the Super Wicked White Cell Squadron is that book that I just inspired. Everything in here was inspired by my childhood. Obviously it's heavy Power Rangers influence. The monsters are very inspired by like that McFarlane style, creepy crawly. The robots are, a lot of the animes that were on in the early 90s and late 80s. But the like overarching message. So the story itself was inspired by the fact that when I was a young guy going through my chemo and stuff, I hated IVs. I experienced like all my vein, like all the things that adults experience when they go through chemo, with the veins being blown out and like all the really like awful, emaciation and stuff. Kids go through it too, and it's like, it's the part that like the commercials and the media really don't give people, is the fact that like, it's not just that we're sad and sick, it's that like our bodies are just being hammered by what they're giving us to fight, the stuff inside of us. So my veins were shot. They used to have to give me like 7-8 IVs to try to like hit the right place on me, and I hated it. It was basically torture. They'd like, you could hear the trepidation in the nurse. Douglas, to the IV room, and like it was like a cartoon. Everybody would clear the hallways, and like you just hear no, and so like it was this fight.
That's me as an adult. Whenever I have to go to the hospital, if someone wants to play, it's not just kids.
No, absolutely, but like it was a battle royale from like the craft room to the IV room, where my parents would have to like unhook my hands off of every door frame and like kick my knees out. And it's just like, I talk about it and I laugh, but I know that it still like triggers those things in my mom where she feels horrible.
Yeah.
But one day I sat down and she's like, going gray and all frazzled. And she's like, hey, the Power Rangers? And I'm like, yeah, because I thought she was just about to give me another bribe for the toy that I was going to get at the end of it. She goes, the White Ranger? Tommy, sure. Yeah, I know Tommy. She goes, he's the White Ranger, right? She's like, yeah. So she goes, they're putting a whole army of White Rangers into your brain to fight the monster that's trying to make you sick. And like something about that logic clicked. And I sat down and I put my, my stiff upper lip, and I threw my arm out, and they slapped her in there. And from that session onwards, it was probably about the 4th or 5th chemo session, it instilled in me like at least a base understanding of why I had to, take the medicine. Um, and so when I was going through that thing in my head of like, what do I want my ensemble all ages cast to be? I like there's a point where like I got to that like, well, I want to call it the White Cell Squadron, but I don't, in today's climate, I don't want it to be perceived as something, um, not what it's representative of. And then so I was just like, well, you just got to add more adjectives to it, So it's the super wicked White Cell Squadron, and all of a sudden it just like it stacks the awesome. So the whole crux of the book is just the all ages inclusivity of the multicultural cast, and the as I go, we're gonna introduce characters with different you know challenges in life, and there's going to be like that whole, I want to do like the like cosmic crisis where squadrons get together, but then there's too many white cells, so they have to fight each other to try to like sort everything out, so it'd be like a very cool kind of Green Lantern thing. But yeah, it's I don't know, man, it turned out, I started writing it, it just naturally evolved into something that I felt was really fun. And then I was able to also challenge myself in writing so that a 9-year-old can read it and work their way through it and like laugh, but as well as like um, develop like an easy to follow story. And so there's a challenge because I feel like everybody wants to be a Frank Miller or an Alan Moore or a Neil Gaiman. Everybody wants to like pour their hearts into these brooding manifestos where it's like, walls of text that have to describe, like, especially, a lot of indie creators and stuff where it's like, this is my one chance to get everything out on the page. But I think if you're committed to it, it's not your one chance, it's one of the chances that you're going to get to continue to show people that you're growing. So I like going with the less is more if I can on a page approach. And I do like the Marvel method where I'll draw my images and then I'll write my story to them. But I just think that, like, just flexing really easy to follow story that's really fun, that keeps you moving. I'm okay if you like flip from one page and then you go to the next page really quick because you ate the words really fast, but then you realize that you missed something. Then you go back and like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then you flip ahead, like, I tell everybody, like, for me, it's a comic book. Like, you throw it to the wind, because that's like, I want kids to step on it. I want them to slam it in their backpack. I don't care about CGC or anything like that. Like, I just want the book to be ingested and enjoyed. And for like anybody, I want, my utopian image of it is like, when a kid has to go for their chemo and they have to strap their arm to the little emery board and tape it all up and stuff. I want them to just see that as like their power armor, and to know that, like, as crummy as it is, like, they're part of the squadron. The giant robot in it, I called the MRI, but it's the enormous mechanical assault robot interceptor class. And like you read the book, the whole transformation sequences, they all get basically like their own MRI inspired pods inside of the machine. And it's the neural uplink is the IV that goes into the hand. So I created as many like callbacks to what kids are experiencing or anybody in the hospital that I just think of Amal in his MRI, and the voice over the speaker, okay, Amal, this next one's going to be 5 minutes, and for those 5 minutes Amal can just like think of this crazy battle that he's having with like these tech bugs or something, so and that's my idealism. But I know that to have the excitement of a child, you got to get to a child's level. And I think that that's like, the perfect hurricane is just showing up and always being grateful for the fact that, like, this is the opportunity that I'm creating for myself. The not to ramble, but like, you know people always say like, oh my God, you've been through so much and yada yada yada, and it's like the again, it's the suffer, like, fluffer, right? And um I just think to myself, like, the reason why I wake up every day is because there's another reality where this day never happened. um and there's another reality where Doug Knight is an accountant who has perfect vision, who never had childhood cancer, and drives a Prius. Like there's all these like different existence that you could be a part of. But the one that I have now is one that, like, I pride myself on living positively, and I want my art, whether it's brooding or dark or X-rated or whatever, to just be like a slap in the head of like energy. And I think that that's like, there's a lot of it out there. The part that sets me apart from everybody else is the fact that it's just my energy.
That positivity really comes across. I think it's a very strong, especially in the Super Wicked White Cell Squadron. The way the characters talk to each other, the way they relate to each other, the way they work together. I don't know. It just comes across very strongly. What would you say? Some people are gonna look at it and they say, "Oh, this guy's just ripping off the Power Rangers." Where do you draw the line between homage and plagiarism?
Well, I mean, the actual definition is 30% of the like real. If it's 30% different, then it's not a ripoff. I think that the line between homage and plagiarism is, again, it's my scope, it's my story. It's if people tell me, well, that's an exact line from whatever, like I haven't read it, so it's like, is it a matter of ignorance or just not having been able to follow it? It's I think that intention is what it's all about. Like the VR troopers, they were a bunch of kids in armor who had robots. Voltron, they had a bunch of kids in armor that had robots. There's all these teams out there where it's a theme of storytelling, not just trying to be the next thing. So I'm not trying to be the Power Rangers. I have created the Super Wicked White Cell Squadron, and I'm not, it's not my intention to run with or outdo what the Power Rangers are doing, because there are people, like, you're never going to make everybody happy, so it's that thing where it's like, as long as I think my intentions are come across as what they are, just a creative measure to get books into hospitals and have fun doing it, then I think that it gives me the understanding for the people that you want the understanding from. I think that obviously you have a pretty large online presence, and how dark people can get when they are using their fingers to express themselves, and they don't have to look, eye to eye with somebody. And I think that because that energy is out there, the only thing you can do to avoid it is either have a better way to communicate with that person in mind and be ready to go into any altercation with the high road mentality, or just cut it out altogether and focus on the people that aren't out to try to burn you down. So as far as all that is concerned, I think that it's just a matter of my creation is my creation. I didn't pull any pictures up of any Megazords to check color matching or anything like that, and I think that when you see somebody's creation is unique to their style, then it's the ability of the artist to show to the people that, like, it doesn't feel like a direct rip of what they're familiar with.
And even if people do see close similarity, they say that what do they call it? It's like that impersonation is a great compliment. So if you look at things like the Orville TV show or the film Galaxy Quest, people say, "Oh, that's a rip-off of Star Trek." That's not.
Yep.
That's not what it is. It's not a rip-off.
Yes.
It's
Yep.
someone that really loves Star Trek,
Mhm.
and they've made their own. They've made their own version of what they love, and they are complementing the source material.
What a great perspective.
But it's still their own. It's still their own creation.
Yep.
You're still putting a lot of your own perspective into it.
Absolutely. You know, to that sentiment as well, like it's does it also come down to, you know, how you perceive other people's words? You know, some people would call something, as you say, a ripoff, but they might just not know the proper word for what they're trying to express. And also other people, like again, in that like someone wearing somebody else's helmet kind of thing, like, you know, when somebody doubles down is like, you know, what do you mean rip off? You know, they're like their fight or flight sensors go to, well, I didn't mean that, but you know what? Yeah, you know, I'm gonna double down on this. Yeah, I said rip off, you know, and it's so crazy how communication can be the fundamental breakdown of like all great successors.
Yeah.
So it's like somebody says rip off, like I worked the comic book convention in Indianapolis in the States last month. And it was my first US show, and it was really cool because I really wanted to see like if I could grab the attention of, you know, the younger demographic and stuff. And there was one kid that came up, and you know, his dad and him and his older brother, they all spent a lot of time in the hospital. And you know, it's not that he was having a bad time, but you could tell that he was just like at the end of the trip. And so I was like, hey man, I would love for you to have one of my books. And like the little boy was like, yeah, you know, he was so excited to, and he saw the robot and he saw and he's like, is it the Power Rangers? I said, no, it's my story. He says, awesome. And then he's like, can you sign it? You know, and the fact that he asked for the autograph, so I gave him the autograph. And you know, and so like I had a few of those reactions where it was really cool to like get that like the excitement. And then I had another kid who came from meeting the dude who played the Black Ranger. His name slips me right now, but and then so like he looked at my book, and oh my god, it was like there was so much salt in that shaker. He just looked at it, he's like, is it the Power Rangers? I was like, nah man, it's like I was like, you know, I was like, I love the Power Rangers when I was your age, so it inspired me to make a book about, you know, a super powered team. And he's just like, he just looked at me again. He's like, so it's not the Power Rangers. You know? And so it's like one of those things where, what are you gonna do? Look at an 8-year-old and say, ugh, or you just laugh it off and, you know, just be like, yeah, man, you're right. It's not the Power Rangers, but if you read it, you might like it, you know? So it's you know, I think there's power in the imitation game, especially like for the convention presence sort of deal is the fan art sales versus the indie creators versus, you know, I'm not sure how it is in Europe, but like for sure here my buddy and I noticed that like people were going to the huge booths with like all the artwork of other superheroes and stuff and ignoring the independent comics with the IP that, you know, represents that person's, you know, work. I'm not pooping on fan artist art because it's still them taking the time and putting the love into the characters that they you know, grew up with or read or whatever. Like I think art is art, and if you have your nose up in the air about it, you're the one with the problem. But when I created Super Wicked White Cell Squadron, what I gave myself is that line that I can toe, where I can draw that anime style mech flying off of the page that reminds people of something else, whether it's Gundam, whether it's Power Rangers, it doesn't matter what it is. The fact is that I'm creating a revenue of easy to access fan art of my own stuff. And it's really fun to look at. And it's like, you know, as it catches steam, people are going to be excited to have the earlier representations of the armor and stuff. And, you know, whereas like with chiasm, like every time somebody sees my character Lil D, they gotta be like, oh, so who's that guy? you know, and it requires like the story, oh, it's the sci-fi retelling of my life as a child, like cancer survivor, blah, 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 blah. But with the Super Wicked White Cell Squadron, I guess it's a squadron, you know, and they either love it or they don't love it, and they keep walking. But what it like I've created is that point where I can make posters of mechs or of power armor, and you know, people are going to feel more comfortable slapping the 20 on the table to take that home with them than, you know, this other superhero that they have to connect to another story about. And doesn't, you know, like the goal is to get myself to be able to sell the book with, you know, without having to sell the person with it. And you know, that takes time, and it also takes a little bit of like legacy building. But I'm also like, I don't expect to be hyper successful tomorrow. I know that it's like, it's the work that you put into it, you know. A house that's built with bricks isn't built in one day. It's one brick, some mortar, you know, stack it, level it, mortar, stack it, level it, make sure that it's all consistent, you know, like there's so much planning. And I think that the people that, you know, get chaffed because they don't get, you know, 10,000 hits on their first, you know, their first concept sketch. You know, it's part of the condition of today, but you're missing out on the fact that like you got to enjoy the suck. You know, you got to like you got to love, like
That's
you don't
one way
have
to
to
put
thrive.
it. Yeah.
You don't have to thrive off of like people hating on you, because that's also a negative you know, place to be at with your creative process. But I think it's the fact that, like, you know, my dad said it to me, this transfers differently for you, but he used to say, like, you know, when you're on the same road as somebody and they're like in your way, you just pass on the left. I'm pretty sure if you pass on the left, you'll be in the ditch. But you know, the same principle is like, you have to know when to just pass around the people that are holding you back. And that's attitudes too. If like, you know, you just have to be prepared that like the grind is what it is. It's like, it's drawing several pictures, you know. Somebody once said your first concept doesn't have to be your best concept. And when I was new to the internet, I remember like taking great offense to it for about a half a day. And then I realized like that person's right. My first concept doesn't have to be my best concept. But it's a very strong one. And I do deserve, like, it does deserve love and attention and growth, you know? So I took a very negative intended comment as I perceived it and turned it into a galvanizing point to double down and continue developing the chiasm universe. And then also gave myself the strength and the permission to create other books. You know, it's like, hey, there might be a truth there. Maybe I should try another book about this or another book about that. Or, you know, it's okay if you have a bunch of, you know, started projects, because it gives you things to work on rainy days or when you're bored or when you're burnt out, you know?
Right. That brings me on to the next question.
Hit me.
You're the writer, you're the artist, you're the colorist, you're the letterer, and your work is so detailed.
Okay, but just a small pin in that.
Oh.
My wife is my editor. So if you see any mistakes, you can blame it on her. Sorry,
Okay.
Continue.
Okay, so I was going to say, I mean, how long does it take you to do a page?
I've got that little time tracker on the iPad with Procreate, and it pegs me typically between 6 and 10 hours a page.
Wow.
And that's you know, start to pretty much finish without any tweaks or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is pretty reasonable. I've done it before. It's like, okay, I want to sink 14 hours into this piece of art, but I hit that like 10-hour point. I read there's nothing more that I want to do to it. And I've developed that ability to say I'm done and go to the next thing. And, you know, as a creator, I realize that, like, you know, your current piece doesn't have to be the best piece. It has to represent growth for the next piece. And so, you know, that's that was one of the cool things about revisiting Chiasm Part 1 and Part 2. I'll show you an example of it. Well, at the beginning of Chiasm 0, you've got the thumbnails from the original version of that story. We'll go with this one. So, like, Oh, it's issue 0. What a pinhead. So like there's parts from this book that I took from the original adaptation, which was like, the 4th or 5th issue. So like these were some of the original images that I didn't have to go in and tweak or anything. I was just super excited with them. And then I was able to put in some like epic art where I was able to like razzle dazzle and like include some of my newer techniques and stuff. And I just like, it's this blend of like old imagery and different line weights and new stuff. And I want I want to be able for people to look back at it and be like, what, this guy have 2 different artists on it? Like, no, it's just the same dummy working at 6-month intervals, but the attention to detail just comes from having big old punk rock Vikings over my shoulder saying don't do that.
Talking of the punk rock, I mean, looking at the chiasm one, I can see the influence there for when you were doing the tattoo art, because a lot of it is like very rock and roll kind of style.
Yes. Yeah, the armor is he's half biomechanical, like the armor of chiasm is half biomech and half bioorganic.
Yeah.
And that's it lends very heavily to my like favorite genres of tattooing. I think they're pretty outdated now, but I love them. I love the fact that there's this whole like existence of people that tried to make themselves look like xenomorphs and really robotic kind of aspects. So I love that stuff. And it's like also one of those things where how do you draw the same bony carapace every single time? Well, you don't necessarily have to if it's part of a living organism that changes and adapts. So it builds like that cheater's flexibility to have fun with a different armor every book if you need to.
Right. Tell us about your collaboration with Lesser Known Comics.
Well, what do you want me to say about Mark Bernal that everybody doesn't already know is a lie? He's honest. So Mark Bernal of Lesser Known Comics, Dan Price, who does Bigfoot Knows Karate. The tagline for that book is that it sells itself with the title of the book. And I were all on a podcast for a show called the Indie Comics Dispatch. And we were doing our introductions. And so it was like, Dan, tell us about yourself. And Dan gave his introduction. And then Brett, the host, goes, Doug, tell us about yourself. And I gave my spiel, legally blind, cancer survivor, love life, make comics, everything's cool. And then Brett's just like, Mark, tell us about yourself. And Mark was just like, come on, how do you expect me to follow that? But it developed into this thing where we were in touch with each other. And he's like, dude, your stuff is sick. And he was super encouraging. And, he showed me what Lesser Known Comics is all about. And it's not so much like it's as much a publication where they give independent artists an opportunity to have, a tight graphics team behind them to polish their books up and help distribute and advertise, as well as it is a indie comics collective where there's like a few of the creators in that umbrella are all these self-driving machines where it's like, we've got our books, we've got our IPs, we've got our own imprints and the things that we're going to roll with because it's the identity that we built with. And Mark, he said to me, he's like, I don't want anything other than just to like incubate great creators and to see them flourish and become, he's like, if somebody gets picked up by a bigger publisher, that's my dream, because A, it's one less headache that I have to deal with, and B, it's showing that like, supporting creativity is the best way to encourage growth. And that happened with Digital Lizards of Doom. Gabe, the creator of that, he got picked up by, I believe it's called Paper Cuts, and they're an imprint of a bigger publisher. And so like it was this whole thing where like Mark was super bummed to not be working with Gabe in a professional sense any longer, but he's super excited that now he's got a friend at a higher level, and you still encourage everything they do. So it's like, it's really cool. It started originally as like having my guy in the States and having somebody that I could bounce pricing off of and have distribute for me from the US to, different places, because it's a lot easier to ship from the States than it is from Canada. I don't know why. Uh, but like, then it turned into this thing where it's like, well, what conventions do you want to work? I want to work like a few US shows. He's like, well, dude, I want to work those too. So it's turned into an opportunity where now I have, a traveling partner where we can go work shows together and proudly, demonstrate the collective of lesser known comics as well as the individual creators. And so his motto is treating artists like humans. And so I've got that advertisement in my books because I think it's a very strong message. And so it's just he's got a lot of really cool things on the go. I think there's like 28 books under his publication currently. And it's just like he writes some books, and there's 30 different other creators. So we have these huddles every Thursday night. So mine's approaching. Oh, someone else just did another White Cell Squadron helmet. Sweet. So it's just like this thing where we all talk and we all chirp, and we say it's like the coolest treehouse that you could ever wanted to have been a part of as a kid, and it's like there's the different groups of people hanging out on different couches, and we're all just have the same thing in mind. And it's positivity and cool art, and the opportunities that come from that.
Great. It's good when people are working together, lifting each other up.
It's incredible.
We're all
it's
lifting ourselves up collectively, I think.
Rising tide lifts all ships.
That's what I was fumbling for. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And I believe in that, like, wholeheartedly too. Like, so coming up in August, I have an opportunity to be a special guest at a show called VonCon. And it's a pop culture expo. But they're very focused on extraordinary individuals doing exceptional things. And so it's going to be one of my platforms to make some connections with children's hospitals and some other really exciting things. But I also get to be on a panel. So he's like, what do you like? Do you want to host the panel? Do you want to do that? So I was like, I've got the perfect host. So I was able to recruit Conrad from Wednesday Night Reviews. And we both selected people from the indie comics community that we think represent, independent excellence. And when I reached out to like the guys that I wanted to draft for it, they were just so stoked. But like, all I could think was, I'm stoked to be able to invite people to help elevate them, because it's just like these personal successes that you achieve are awesome. But like, if you're not sharing them with your peers, then it's a lonely ride up. And you can never plan on whose trajectory is going to be where. So it's like you might plateau here, but that dude that was sitting beside you might have just landed a contract with Cartoon Network, and it's this like slingshot effect of like, well, Doug's a good dude and he's a sick artist. Come on up here, And so it's like, it's if you don't encourage the people around you with healthy competitive spirit, then you're not doing anything to grow as a person as well as a creator. I think that's like, that not holding yourself to the standard of like being better than somebody, but holding yourself to the standard of being better than your last effort, and realizing that every like lesser known comics, they have killers. They've got like David Lujan does these he's a Latino American from Texas, and he creates these like sick Korean horror comic books. And it's like I've talked to him before. I was like, dude, what's your like? Where do you get this? He's like, I don't know, man. I just really like drawing that style. But he's so good at it. And Ray Garza, he does a book called Tank McGregor, and it's like everything that Futurama should have been. There's just, but to hold yourself, and when I told them both, it's like David has this like incredible understanding of like texture and story control, and then Ray Garza has like his line weight based off of how his color saturations pair up to it. Like there's all these different things, and you're like, oh, I wish I could do that, you know, but it's not that I wish I could do that because I'm envious of it. It's just that like I see that and I just think it's so cool that their brains, like they, you know, they did those little pathway parts and they spread out to these different areas that allow them to see their art in that way. And so it's just like, and then there's that thing of pride to be in alignment with people of that skill level, you know, like most artists are their own biggest critics. And I think that that's important to a fault. I think that like it's so good to hold yourself to this standard, but it's also like important to know like when to just like let off and be like, that's good. I did good. It's not great for me, but you know, my mom's gonna hang it on the fridge, you know. And I think that like when people reference you along the same lines or in the same conversation, you know, you don't need to get a swollen head about it, but it's just like that's your vindicating point to be like, you know, well, I don't think I'm as good as these guys, but they think that I'm as good as those guys, you know. And I think that it's a very healthy dialogue to form within your own brain as far as realizing, you know, what milestones you're achieving, without, you know, coming off narcissistic.
So we've got Super Wicked White Cell Squadron on the Kickstarter now. What's coming up next? What's in the future for Cross-Eye Comics?
So I just wrapped the punk rock anthology with Apollo City Comics podcast. I've got Super Wicked White Cell Squadron is over on June 4th, so this Sunday coming. After that, I have batch 5 of lesser known comics mini stories where my friend Josh Jones and I are debuting our story Ray Gun. So he did all the writing, I did all the art, coloring, lettering, all that jazz. And then after that, I'll be on future sci-fi tales with Drew Lenhart from Snowy Works. And then after that, what's after that? After that, I think I have another anthology that I'm on board with. At the same time as I'll be working on getting, I'm also on the lesser known comics inks. So I've submitted just some inks for one of my other stories called The Man from Scratch for that one. That comes out September. And then I've also got the next Super Wicked White Cell Squadron. I'll start penciling as I kind of get the event schedule for everything going on. And I want to get to a lot of events. So the comic books are rolling out as I kind of have time to chisel the dadding away and, you know, keep everybody else happy. So there's definitely going to be more chiasm, more Super Wicked White Cell Squadron, and a couple other fun books as well.
You got so much energy to do all that and have a family and keep everything going. That's amazing.
Coffee.
Okay. Well, I'm certainly going to look forward to seeing what's coming next, and I think everybody else will as well. So, Doug, thank you so much for talking to me today, and we'll look forward to seeing what you've got coming in the future.
Thanks for letting me ramble, Zach.